Morning all and welcome to Jump Advisory's discussion of the week. As usual, if you can hear my dulcet tones, please drop a message into the chat box, and welcome to this week's discussion on the 10 intangible assets. It's quite interesting. Last week we had a very sort of interesting debate. We got lots and lots of people talking about that and coming back to us to have a further discussion on the 10 tangible assets. So thank you for your feedback. I've put the 10 tangible assets up there in case you were not on last week. But if you weren't on last week and you want to find out what they were, log on to our website. You can find in our news and views section a recording of last week's, but also a recording of all the webinars that we've done and all the discussions that we've done, since Jump started. So let's very quickly start to look at the 10 intangible assets and what that actually is. An intangible asset is a non-physical in nature. Now that sort of describes most of the Jump team in some way or form, but on a serious note, it's about goodwill, brand recognition, intellectual property right, to name but a few. However, in most companies, we don't seem to value these intangibles due to either a lack of understanding or a lack of what these intangibles actually do. And therefore, these assets, which potentially could be gaining us an awful amount of value and money, are tend to be losing us potential value and money. And what's worse, we talked about last week about leaving money on the table. In this one, what's even worse is a buyer sort of evaluates your business, they can start to remove large chunks of cash from that table that they put in front of you. So again, like last week, got an awful lot to cover with the 10 intangibles. So we're going to push for time. So gentlemen, please answer quick. Make sure they're good answers. Guys, if you want to know anything about the answers and you want more explanation, drop a message in the chat box and we'll feel free to sort of work on those and we'll expand on those and we'll answer them accordingly. So have your pens ready, get your coffee tapped up. Let's drive in straight away. The 10 intangible assets of a business. First one, employee relationship and trained employees. It's an interesting one, and the guy sort of threw this one at me first of all and said, do you want to sort of pick up on this, which is unlike me to start off because it just seems like I'm talking constantly, but I will start off.
You are, that's because you are.
Paul, that's only to stop you talking. But as we go, so the 10 employee relations and trained employees, we talk about retention of staff as a real key sort of value in a business, and it really is a value in the business, but it's not just about retention, it's also about attraction in the first place. So it's about your EVP and about how you attract candidates into your business, but then once they're in, it's about how you retain them. I have to talk with my clients about make your place a really hard place to get into, but make it an even harder place to leave. So it's about then what you do, and it's not just about training, it's about that constant training, that constant development. What opportunity do those people have? What can they grow into within your business? So having a highly skilled workforce that is really engaged in your business then becomes a true value to your business. So whether it's a client looking to buy your business or a client looking to engage with your business, it becomes a genuine value driver for both sets of parties. And what that does, if you have a long retention of staff who are very engaged in your business, it makes you an attractive proposition from candidates coming to want to work with you, clients want to work with you, and any purchaser that wants to buy with you. So making sure you understand that. And that doesn't mean just train them when the first week they arrive and then doing nothing with them. It is constant development, constant training, constant mentoring, and constant coaching of these people to give them opportunity within your business. So I think that's the first one that I'd kick off on that. Sharpie, you wanted to come on that one as well.
Thank you. And thanks for referring to the three of us as intangible assets. I think Paul probably is, but that's more about his height and we can never see him. But
don't you start on me, Sharpie.
I think he's sat on two cushions. I think he's sat on two cushions this morning. Thank you. You've covered some great points there, Howard. I think, when we talk about employee relations and our people, we talk about it's human capital. And I think as an investor, one of the worst things you can do is take over a business or invest in a business and then everybody leaves because you're in effect left with nothing or not a lot. So I think it's all the things you've said. I think it's how you measure that goodwill of your people. I think it's about how you measure employee engagement. And we've talked about the importance of things like pulse surveys in the past. And just to emphasize, you don't have to be a big business. If you've got 6 or more people in your business, you should be doing some form of regular assessment in terms of how engaged your employees are. I think it's about, you've touched upon training, but how much do you spend on training per head in your organization? And that's not just your salespeople, it could be your marketing manager, it could be the people doing the back office. So it's the investment there in your employees. And I think it's also about how you measure things like your values. We've talked about this in the past, and it's something that's really close to my heart. So what you measure speaks volumes about what's really important to you. It's important to measure the bottom line, clearly, and the top line. But it's also important to measure values and how aligned your people are to the values of the business. And probably the last important thing for me is just how you measure people's performance. So, what do you do on a monthly and quarterly basis? How do you motivate people? How do you inspire? How do you set targets? And how do you monitor and measure those? So having a really robust process in place for that as well, for me, is really important. So just to summarize, it's about measuring the goodwill for me, and it's about looking at human capital and trying to put some valuation on what you've got as a business.
Thanks, Paul. It's a really interesting one. I think staff are the key intangible to any business.
100%.
And if you treat your staff, depending on how you treat your staff, is the results that you get. And I think we said when we first started off in lockdown, it's the way you treat your staff will be really important, because the way you treat your staff is the way they'll treat your clients and your candidates, and therefore that has a massive ripple effect right across the business. So we move on to the second intangible. We move on to the second one. Second one is vendor and partnership network. Dave, I think you wanted to sort of jump in on that one.
I'm going to just finish off on the last point as well by saying that somebody joined our webinar last week and and phoned me up afterwards and said, you do seem to have quite a lot of banter. You seem to get on really well with each other. And I thought about it for a minute and thought, yeah, I guess we do. And I think that's really important. So I think it's important in the team as well. So vendor and partnership network. I think the thing about this is that often when you're running a recruitment business, you look at your sales team, you look at your business development, and you think, how can I grow this business? It's their job. When actually there are partners out there that you can use and work with to help you grow your business. And when we're talking about making your business more valuable, I would encourage you to reach out to some of those partners and see where they can help you to add to your bottom line. It could be your CRM partner, it could be your marketing partner, it could be your website developer, it could be a whole host of things. It doesn't matter whether you're a small business or whether you're a larger business, you're going to have partners who are helping you to deliver a service to your clients. Well, when you come to value your business, part of the strength of the valuation, and this is an intangible, is, well, how strong are they with their partners? And how are their partners helping to deliver a service to the customer? And if you can get that bit right, it can really add an intangible value to the business that you have. Yep. Because what you're saying is, I'm working with someone else to deliver this to my client, whether it's placing permanent person, placing teams of people, I'm doing a search, placing a team of contractors. Use your partner network, reach out to them, ask them. An example, and I'll give you one example. When I was at the Gen Group, our bank was Lloyds Bank. We asked them, who do they know that in their network is hiring? Because we were supplying in the fintech space in IT. And they gave us 2 leads, and one of those leads led to a placement of 10 people. Yep. They were our partner. They were our finance provider, but they were our partner. And that can add value to your business if you can work well with your partners.
Yeah, perhaps I could just add to that point, Dave. And you know me, I do like to trump you if I can. But I remember...
You can't say Trump today of all days. You should be Biden.
I'll Biden you today in that case. Yeah, I'll take your Trump and I'll add a Biden. So I think this point about partnerships is very important. We've talked a lot over the last 12 months about expanding service to clients, looking to see what you can add in terms of providing a value proposition. And sometimes that takes you way outside of your own level of expertise or professionalism. And that's when, for example, you might bring in an HR expert as an example, or somebody involved in mental health or whatever, but you can quite comfortably, and partners are perfectly happy with this, white label that service. So there are methods of extending your service. Of course, this always comes down to being in front of clients and understanding where those gaps are. Just to this point about bidening you, I've invented a new word. We back in my Office Angels days, we were partners with the Guardian newspaper and the Evening Standard when we were running the Executive of the Year competitions, and we got enormous levels of publicity by working alongside these newspapers, publicising the competition we were running, which led to a huge volume of candidates coming into the office and a great deal of enhanced brand recognition. So, I think it takes a little bit of imagination to think about what kind of partners enhance the business, but it's a great point.
Thank you, Dave and Paul, and the Oscar for those who like to get on with each other will be going to both of you on us how we move forward.
My family who.
So as we move forward into the third one, this is the real big one, I think, and this is the one where we start to look at how your business really does, create value, and that's relationships with clients. PJ, I know I won't be able to stop you coming on this one, so why don't we throw that open to you?
Well, I mean, if staff are number one, which is true, and I agree with the first points made, then absolutely relationships with clients has to be second, I would suggest. And we've spent humongous amounts of time, is another word I think I've just invented today, talking about developing deeper relationships with clients. This is intangible in some respects. I think it's worth mentioning that you want to try to cement those intangible relationships in something tangible, meaning that ideally, particularly from a purchaser's perspective, if you're selling your business, you have signed agreements with customers. So you have signed up contracts that can be passed on to the purchaser, rather than a contingent relationship, which of course isn't defined beyond your own terms and conditions of business. So I think that looking for those tangibles from the intangibles is important, but clearly relationships with clients, how deep those relationships are, and multi-layered relationships, because here's a good quality point, and in that if you are exiting your business, looking to move on, or taking a back seat in the organization, maybe even diminishing your shares, your equity in the business. If what you want to be able to do is to be in a position to say to any prospective purchaser that the bulk of the relationships with your customers are through the people working in your business. You may well have a presence, but you shouldn't be the focal point for your clients. So we've talked a lot about multi-layered relationships within organizations. And I think that's a very interesting and a very valid point here. If any one person, let alone the owner of the business, is the only point of contact, you already have a dangerous situation. So you've got to be always looking to see how many people, key critical people in your organization, are aligned to customers. And we've talked often about C-suite alignment. So for example, your financial director or CFO aligning with the CFO or financial director of a customer, your HR director or your HR practitioner that you may be aligned to, having a relationship, as it were, with the HR person within that client, and so forth. So you have those layers of relationships where people are talking to each other from similar backgrounds, similar experiences, similar qualifications. This is a very important function, and of course, it's one that you've constantly, as business people, building on. But I would argue very strongly, step back, look at the clients you work with, understand who owns those relationships in your organization, and start to strategically consider how you can enhance those relationships and diminish the responsibilities that sit perhaps on one person's shoulders.
Dave, I think you were sort of looking for the duo of Dave and Paul to come in on this one. So
yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because when we talk about building your business, we're not making the assumption that at some time you may want to sell it, but the more valuable you can create your business, it gives you another option.
Yeah.
And I've been involved in buying and selling companies because of my role both at Spring and when we sold our business. And I remember you get asked a number of questions by people who are trying to buy your firm. And we got asked at Intertech 127 questions before we even went to the first stage. But I always remember one of the very, very key questions that we got asked was, on a scale of 1 to 10, give each customer contact a score on how much they value your service. And it wasn't just the customer, it was the customer contact. So you may have a relationship with HSBC, your business have, but how many contacts do you have a relationship with at HSBC? How valuable would they say that contact is? And you can use this time as you build your business during 2021 to evaluate where your relationships are, how strong those relationships are, and what you need to make them stronger. And I would undertake a sort of mapping exercise. We can help you with that if you want, but to undertake a mapping exercise to really get under the skin of where your consultants, your team leaders, your managers, your other C-suite staff and yourself, where they are in the relationships with the clients. Because when you come to perhaps sell your business, it won't just be the numbers they'll be looking at, it's the strength of the relationship that potentially a buyer can build on. And particularly if you've got a strong relationship than they have in the same client, they can build on that. So relationships absolutely matter.
We talked about that a lot last week, didn't we, about that relationship, and about, we've talked about client management and building client plans of what you'll do with the clients, about the threats in the clients, your response within the clients, how strong you are absolutely within that client. And I think it's really important, and certainly the clients that I'm talking to, it's about creating that client strategy for each individual client. We talked about last week that around about 40% of your client base recycles every year and that you need to renew every year. Therefore, 60% is staying. It's what are you doing with that 60%? When you get that new 40%, what are you doing with that new 40% to make that part of the 60%, etc., and keep driving that? So you've really got to work hard on that and push that forward. So let's move on very quickly on to the next one, because obviously we might start to run out of time. Okay, so let's start looking at third-party relationships. Now, Sharpie, we've heard enough from Dave and Paul. Let's throw it back to you, mate.
I've heard enough from Dave and Paul before we'd even got started. Well, this is a really interesting one, because this is almost not what to do, and this is all about whether leading on from what Dave and Paul have said. It's about the relationships, but it's also about whether you control those relationships and whether you're in control of your own destiny. I think if we go back a few years, when I was at Interquest, it was really hard, because a number of consultants were chasing opportunities, and you've mentioned one there with the likes of HSBC, and they'd get all excited because they'd say, right, I'm through the door now, and then obviously the first question you'd ask, well, how have you done that, and what does that mean? And you do a bit of digging, and then you quickly find out that you're on a PSL with Reed, as it was at the time. But it could be anybody. It could be an Alexander Mann. It could be a Hayes and a Deco. And you're one of 5, 6, and the margin's tight. And honestly, this is Keystone Cops moment, because every relationship where you're not in control of the client relationship, i.e. you're going through a third party, I've only ever seen it go one way, and that is each year they'll chip away at the margin. They'll squeeze you in terms of opportunity. These organizations only ever want to fill as many roles as what they possibly can themselves. That's how the commercial model works, unless you're on a neutral vendor model, of course. So the question is here, if you've got any clients where it's an important client, you've got quite a chunky bit of spend going through an arrangement, but it's through a third party, that has got a negative value. So what you want to be doing is making sure that all your big clients, you're dealing with the client direct and you're not going through a third party. 6, 7 years ago, 8% of the top 10 clients, so 8 out of top 10 clients at Interquest were going through third parties. When I left, there was 1 in the top 10. So, that's what you've got to do. It takes time. You can't just, exit these things straight away, because you've got to have something to replace it with. But it's all about having control and being in control of your own destiny.
And I think you're right there on that. I mean, I've worked with small companies where their major client was through a third party, and you just become at their beck and call, and it's at the beck and call, and it's not really to them about service. They are just demand. Where when you work with a client, you can start to work with a client and create a relationship and create trust. And because you're in more often than not with a third party relationship, you're dealing with, a resourcer or researcher, etc., that's probably got little less understanding than you have of the marketplace, but are demanding an awful lot from you. And it's because you don't have that end relationship. Sometimes you're working on jobs. I mean, we've all had that CV black hole when you work on jobs and CVs just fall down a hole. It's just a massive negative equity for yourself and working from there.
Yeah, totally agree.
Move on, because we're running out of time. We're already sort of halfway through, and we're not even halfway through the 10. So, intellectual property rights, Mr. Jacobs.
Yeah, you give me all the great subjects. So I'll give you a quick story about intellectual property rights. When I set up my first management consultancy business, Love Work Life, about 4 or 5 months into the beginning of my business, I was on a Saturday morning reading one of the trade magazines and noticed a big advertorial, 2-page spread. 2 of my ex-regional managers from Office Angels were setting up a new business, and they were going to call it Love Work Life Recruitment. I was thrilled. So I contacted my lawyer, and he said, "You don't have a trademark on your name, do you?" And I said, "No," because clearly it hadn't crossed my mind to do that. And it cost me £5,000 and a lot of aggravation to get them to change the name of their new business to something that I won't repeat because you may know them. So I learned at first hand, at a point when I really didn't want to be spending £5,000 on legal fees, how important it is to get your act together when it comes to intellectual property. And I certainly haven't forgotten that. There's 3 things in particular you really want to be aware of. One of them is trademark. So I would urge anybody, because I've had the experience, that trademarking your name, your logo, anything you're using as a sort of object, if you like, even down to the colors and so forth, that trademark your logo, trademark your name. I would argue, I had a conversation this morning with a client who's discovered that his name, in fact, his exact logo has been stolen by a company and are using it in India. Now the thing about trademarking is it's expensive. Normally, your lawyers would suggest that you use it purely for Europe, unless you're prepared to trade abroad, way abroad, say in India or America. What you have to ask yourself is, if somebody is stealing your name or your trademark, is it harming your business? So if you're not planning to trade in Mexico or India or Sri Lanka or any other of those countries, I mean, I've gone 1,000 countries, then I would argue it probably isn't impacting you. If they are trading in your territories, then it is impacting you. So I would urge you to talk to your lawyers and consider getting your name, your trademark, your logo trademarked as soon as possible. There is a little bit of expense and there is a recurring fee, but I would urge you to do it. It takes some months. They have to be published in terms of notices and so forth. You're probably looking at a 4 to 6 month process, but get that done. If you are looking at registering designs, which generally speaking we don't have within our industry sector, then consider that. Consider patents, particularly around any of the processes or anything you've designed specifically for clients. Consider patenting those particular methods so that somebody can't steal them. And to the point we're making here, it adds real value to your business if you have legally cemented these areas, your trademarks, any designs, any patents. Not cheap, but it's a hell of a lot more expensive, as I discovered, if you end up with somebody stealing your name. So I would urge you to consider looking at getting that done as urgently as you can if you haven't already done it.
I love your quick stories, Paul. They're awesome. So let's move on to number 6 as we rattle down the top 10. So non-revenue rights, Sharpie.
So I think this is a fairly quick one for me. So this is almost, Howard, things that you haven't yet realised the value of. So this could be, this is mainly down to things like a sales pipeline. So where you've potentially got a contract about to land, or you've got something at the latter end of the sales pipeline. So looking at the sales pipeline as a whole is really important. But then looking at the things that haven't yet billed or haven't yet landed, but have a very high probability of landing or billing. So this is really about the sales pipeline for me. And it's about recognizing the future value of something that is in the sales pipeline. So having a really strong sales pipeline is really important. Being able to break it down is really important in terms of the latter stages, and understanding the value of that opportunity will increase the overall value of your business.
It's quite interesting when you sort of look at that, isn't it? When people start to look at, when investors start to look at investing in your business, if it's not materialized yet, you've not made a placement yet, they might then start to count that against. But then they look at the opportunity, and then they start to say, right, what's that opportunity look like? How are you going to make sure that you're competing in that opportunity? So it swings both ways depending on what you've got. It could be that you've got a great partnership, but it's a third-party relationship that you're going through, but you've yet realized that would probably drive the value back down. It could be an end-to-end relationship. Well, it'll start to drive the value up again, and you've got to look at that in both those ways and from there. So you're right, Sharpie, that was a really quick one. So let's move on to one that is probably one of the biggest ones that we will talk about today. There are obviously a few more after this, but this one here, brand recognition. Brand recognition is huge. And Sharpie, this is your bag, really. So let's jump in there, and I'm sure Dave and Paul will want to jump in as well at the end of this one too.
So this is a massive one, and this potentially, along with client relationships, are the two big ones in terms of how complex they are. When you talk brand recognition, I think it sort of sounds quite vague. So I think you've almost got to try and break that down into the value of your brand, the awareness, and then I put social in there because I think social is a big sort of channel. So if you think about the awareness, if you think about brand value, it's about coverage. How much coverage in the market do you have? How frequently are you pushing out articles into the market? How much content are you pushing out? The frequency of blogs, but also how much engagement are you getting out there in terms of people responding, clients connecting, your followers. So this is all about your reach of your voice out in the market. And it's really, really important because I think, most investors, but most, people that equally run businesses, everybody recognizes most people recognize the importance of having a really strong voice in the market. This, of course, all plays back to your strategy, and your brand value has got to be aligned back to what your strategy is, and it's got to be underpinning it. In terms of brand awareness, it's about your web traffic. It's about your web content. It's about how much traffic you're driving back to your website. If you think about this in simple terms, your website is your shop front. If you're a retailer, you'd be sort of shouting about all the things that you're doing inside, but you'd be trying to drive traffic through the front door into the outlet or your shop. And it's the same principle with businesses. So it's all about trying to drive as much traffic, increase the awareness, increase the noise, make a connection with people, be all out there and visible, so people hear and touch your brand, and then you're driving them back to the website. So how do you measure the website traffic? Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? And then laterally, and most importantly, are you converting the website traffic? Because it's great having fans and followers and footfall through your front door or your shop door, but if you're not converting it into people that are actually spending and buying, then you're not actually doing what, the whole principle about brand awareness is all about. So it's all about that conversion rate. And you should be able to easily tag candidates that are coming through to your website, to applying to jobs or, registering the details, to actually getting into your CRM. And then when you place it, you should be able to pull that data out quite easily. So measuring that return on investment is really, really important. And the last thing, we've talked about LinkedIn a lot, is not just about followers, it's about engagement. And that's what we're trying to measure here. It's about how much people comment, how many links you've got going back to other credible sources, and how much market intelligence you're actually sharing in the marketplace. And the last one, just really quickly, is just how much research and development you're adding. So part of the intangible assets is about thought leadership. It's about how well do you know the market and how well are you demonstrating that knowledge.
I think those points are so well made. It's so true. It's a difficult thing when you're a smaller niche recruitment company to put a value on it in the way that analysts will put a value on Coca-Cola or Microsoft or Google. We don't have that opportunity. But to our local market, And if we're a national company to our national market, there is a value in your brand. The only thing I'd add to Paul is how do you articulate your brand across your staff, and how would your customers articulate your brand? And does it pass the roll the eyes moment? Sometimes when you hear a brand in recruitment, you just go, oh no, not them. That's the worst bit that you can get when you're talking about value in your business, an intangible asset. You don't want anybody to be rolling their eyes when they hear your company name. Absolutely.
And I would just add one last final point, and that is, I think that your brand is incredibly valuable, as Paul correctly so succinctly expressed it. And you need to be guardians of your brand. So there's no diminishment of its meaning, and that means that you can't allow people around you to use the wrong fonts, the wrong colors, the wrong Pantone colors, mess around with it. It is the reason why huge corporations like Coca-Cola and all the other bigger corporate have huge volumes of lawyers protecting their brand. It's an incredibly important asset to a business. But to Paul's point, it's what you do with the brand and how you measure the impact of the brand that means so much when it comes to building value in your company.
I think it's interesting when we talk about brand, because we're talking about the company's brand and the company's recognition. What we've also got to understand in recruitment as well, it is the individual brand of the recruiter as well. Absolutely, sometimes, Howard. And I think sometimes people forget that, and that's what you're talking about there, PJ. Is that if I, as an individual, are putting something out in different Pantone colors, different fonts, etc., different tone of voice to my core brand, then there's a conflict there, and we've got to sort of work from that. And that sort of leads nicely into the next bit, which is influence in the marketplace. And I think this is something that I've worked on an awful lot with over the years, is how to influence your marketplace. And I'm not talking about going out there and sort of being aggressive and driving into the marketplace. I'm going about how you sort of grow your market. So when that brand recognition comes and you make that call to a client, they already know who you are. And so for me, there's simple things we look at. The first thing is pitch. Can you pitch your business in less than 2 minutes succinctly to a client, where a client walks away and thinks, I want to know more? That first 2-minute pitch is all about getting the client into that next part of the actual sale and next part of the sale funnel, whatever it be. So to influence the marketplace, you've got to be able to pitch with passion from there. Once you pitch with passion, this goes back to brand recognition, and certainly both the product, the company core brand and the personal brand. It's your profile. Because what do people do when they start to look at marketplaces? They'll instantly jump on LinkedIn, Twitter, wherever it be, to find your business. They'll Google your business and they'll Google you. And so your profile then becomes really important. I had a client yesterday who rang me up and said, I've got these types of jobs. Can you recommend another agency? And I said, of course I can. Do you want me to send an invite? He said, no, can you tell me who they are first so I can check them out? And he came back and said, yeah, they look really professional. Feel free to introduce me. So your profile becomes really important. The next P, obviously, then is publish. What you publish constantly becomes part of your brand recognition, and it becomes part of what you influence. So if people are waiting for things that you publish and like the things that you publish, and they recognize the things that you publish, then what you're doing is you're influencing the next part of your line, which is your product line, which is your clients and your candidates. Now, I always say to clients, when I make agency owners, you can't tell whether on LinkedIn or Twitter whether the person is a client or a candidate. So what you publish needs to be almost sort of omnipresent over all of that to make sure you're driving that in. Look at what the market's doing, looking at what things are doing in the marketplace, and have that product really involved in what you're publishing. And the final one, I think, when we talk about influencing the marketplace, is who you partner with. How many times I've had this conversation with clients, as in agency owners, why aren't you putting your major clients on your website? And the usual answer is, because I'm scared that someone else is going to rob them. Well, if someone's going to rob them, that means that you haven't got a relationship with your client. You haven't got a relationship with your employees. That means your vendor partnership is weak. So that means that you're worried about that. If you are proud of the clients that you're dealing with and you've got a really strong relationship with them, then you're dealing with a bit like we talked about HSBC, then other clients will go, if they're dealing with HSBC, they must be a good client. So who you partnership is really important. But there's other ways to create partnerships as well. Who's an influencer in your marketplace? If you're posting things on LinkedIn, can you tag that person in and get them to respond? I remember a client that was working in the aviation marketplace, and they got really excited because they tagged Richard Branson in on a post, and Richard Branson answered the post, and all of a sudden they got hundreds and hundreds of comments underneath, purely because Richard Branson had answered the post. In by sort of de facto, they'd become an influencer stood next to Richard Branson. So influencing your marketplace isn't just about, are you the biggest agency in the marketplace? It's about how you truly interact with that marketplace and following all those pitch, profile, publish, product, and partnership, and what you do with that to make sure you're influencing every single part of the marketplace. And what all of that does, it influences your employees. And influencing your employees in the most positive way makes them be employees that are more engaged in your business, and you'll retain longer.
I would just on that, I'd just sort of add, I think your point about shouting about which clients you work with is really important. And I work with a client over in Yorkshire, as you know, and they're constantly shouting about the clients that they work with. And they've never lost one because they've shouted about it, but they have gained clients because of the credibility. And this is a small, boutique, mainly local agency in Yorkshire. And the other one I'd just add to that point is, again, I'm working with a really small company, but really well-known agency in Lancashire. And they support a local CSR initiative. It's about supporting youth people in youth category. And it's all about trying to support those people in terms of getting them back into work. And there's a number of really well-known local companies that support this charity, and they play a big part of it. So they're really well known in the local market because they actively support and feel very passionate about supporting a local charity. So there's lots of things you can do. You don't have to be a big agency. There's lots of things you can do to influence your local market and be really well known in that area.
And just to add final point to that, be an expert. And to your point earlier, Paul, when you're talking about tagging people and placing posts, being that thinking head, be seen as the expert in your particular area or your particular subject matter. And I think that is something that adds value. Last point I'd make, it links back to the trademark again, making sure that wherever you can, you're always linking it to your name, your color scheme. Make sure that your name is becomes synonymous with the service offering you provide.
I think that's really, and I think that sort of then leads into the sort of next one, which is modus operandi and tech. And again, this sort of really falls on me. I remember sort of being at a company and I won a Bullhorn Award for putting tech right at the center of the business.
Excuse me, Howard, which I remember you dropped. You actually dropped and smashed, is Irish.
If I remember right, Paul, what actually happened was coming off the tube, some guy ran past me and rocked it out straight out of my hand. And
you hadn't had a belly full of beer. We won't go.
I hadn't actually. It was at 6 o'clock actually. So there you go. So thanks for your indictment there, Paul. Thanks for that. I'll just log you off this call. So as we're moving forward, so tech, tech is really important. I hear so many clients say my people won't use the CRM. Well, that's because they don't see the value in your CRM. So how often do you look at the actual process of your CRM, and how often do you talk to your employees to improve that CRM process? Again, a lot of front office and back office have a dialogue with each other constantly and at loggerheads about what they do, and that's because they're not talking to each other and they're not sort of respecting each other. And that's not because they don't like each other. It's generally because the processes don't actually match. And one of the big ones of that is collecting the right invoicing detail or the right PO numbers, etc. It's because the process in the first place isn't right. You talk about payroll. How many clients do I still talk to who have a paper timesheeting system for their temps or contractors? How does that look to the temp, the contractor? How does that look to the client? But how does that look to the people inside your business? So I always think about when we start to talk about tech and the modus operandi that we use, we should start to think about people, and people being your employees, clients, candidates, suppliers, And when I talk about employees, we talk about front office and back office. So if we start to look at our processes constantly, and we start to think, can we improve our processes? Then all of a sudden we start to think, well, technology can certainly take a lot of things away. And what that means, it means we can add more time to do more front-facing, client-orientated work than we have done before. So I always think, get your tech sorted out properly. You could buy hundreds and thousands of pieces of tech. Find the tech that works for you, make sure it's implemented properly, make sure you train and develop your people, and make sure it is adding value. And I always think about when you start to put tech and your modus operandi, can you do it faster? Does it reduce your overall costs? Does it make a bigger profit? And once you start to think about tech in that way, then all of a sudden you can start to work on what's going on. So if people aren't using your CRM, it's not because the CRM is poor, it's because maybe we haven't trained them on the processes and they value the process and how those processes work. So really look at your tech and look at your modus operandi and make sure that you are process proud but never satisfied, and driving those processes and upgrading those processes all along.
And just to add a point, Howard, this lovely word, amortization, make sure that you are always reinvesting, making sure that you put money aside to upgrade consistently, because at the rate of technology changes, the way the methods that we're seeing now being used and the rate of change, whatever you're purchasing today in a couple of years' time is already outdated. So always look to invest money, keep money aside for upgrading.
And I'd say on that, make sure your tech is secure. So unlike me walking off the tube with a bag with my whatever it was, award in, okay, not very secure, and someone bumped into it and smashed it against the side of the tube, okay, make sure your tech is secure. Do not underestimate how many people want to hack into your tech and take stuff out of your tech.
Good point.
So make sure that you make sure your tech is secure. Yeah. So to move on to the last one, and the 10th and final one is customer lifetime value and data. Sharpie.
I think PJ has covered quite a bit this off, so I'll try and keep it brief and to the point. So I think, we've talked about here about the duration of contracts. So, or first and foremost, have you actually got a contract? So do you have a contract in place with your client? What's the duration of that contract? What's the process for that contract being renewed? And do you understand when it will be renewed? I think there's nothing more frustrated than when you're writing bids or you're running a business and you suddenly get it sprung upon you that a client's gone out to tender and you think, well, why didn't you know that? So understanding what the process is from a client perspective, being really close to them and understanding when they're going out to market and being prepared is really important. I think the second thing I'd just add is around market share. So do you understand your market share in that client? If not, don't be afraid to ask. I've asked that question numerous times. I've never been not given that information once. I think it's just in terms of how you pitch it and promote it. And I think the last point is just around, we've talked about this before, so how often do you meet your clients? What's the frequency? What do you meet your clients for? What data do you share? We've talked about market intel being a really key intangible asset. So what market intel do you share? What's the frequency and who does that? And the last thing is, do you measure your client satisfaction? Really important.
I think they're great points, Paul. I think the other thing is to try to bring what you do for your customer to life, because that adds a value. So instead of saying we place 6 teachers here, it sounds so much better if you say our teachers helped 30 students move up a grade. We staffed a hospital ward where nobody could find any staff. Our contractors developed an app that made traders trade more efficiently. If you can bring the work that the people you supply do to life, it shows that you are adding a value to the customer. And if you trade with that customer for quite a long time, then you've got a really strong lifetime value story with that customer. And investors and people looking at your business love things like that because you bring it to life.
DJ, have you got anything to add? Because I know you're desperate to go because you've got another webinar to jump on.
Yeah, I'm hosting a webinar for a client in about 10 minutes, so I have to jump in a second. No, I think you guys have, I was just posting a quick note saying I think this has been, over the last 2 webinars, some of our best material in many respects, because we've got to think put a tremendous amount of content into these brief 45-minute sessions. I would just add that I think each one of these points we could spend a long time discussing, but if you want more information from us on any of these areas specifically, or the whole thing, just contact us offline. We'd be happy to have a conversation. I'm just going to quickly give a quick point that I put on a video tomorrow. We are still offering, and will continue to offer, 1 hour free consultations to anybody listening to us, or indeed anybody you know that would find our assistance or support useful. Please let people know. Please avail yourself of this opportunity. There's so much we can help you with, particularly during these challenging times.
Thank you, Paul. Sharpie, we've talked about growing our customer lifetime value by putting new products into clients, etc. You want to sort of very quickly announce a new product that you want to roll out to people. So very quickly.
So I think everybody knows just how passionate I feel about marketing, and the key part it's got to play in sales. It's something I feel very passionate about. I'm probably biased. I think that's probably quite fair. But I've been working with 3 marketing managers who are in very small agencies over the past few months, and it's pushed me to set up a small forum for small agencies where they may have a marketing person or a marketeer or a marketing assistant. And we're going to set up a forum of 8, maximum of 8, so it's going to be capped. We're going to do it in non-competing territories and geographies. And it's there, should anybody wish to find out more details, just drop me a line, give me a call or message me, and I'll share more details. But it's all about trying to create a forum for marketing professionals in the recruitment sector to share ideas, share knowledge, but also draw down from my expertise and my years of running marketing teams as well, to try and make a positive difference to the bottom line. Because I think marketing, from my experience, can make a massive difference, Howard. So if anybody's interested in that, we've got 8 spaces, 4 have already gone. So I've got 4 spaces left. If you're interested, if you've got a marketeer or a marketing manager and you're interested, give me a shout.
Cheers, Paul. And I think as we draw this session to a close, we've got to remember we've got one more last session in the series. Next week we have a special guest, Richard Brady, who is the co-founder and MD of Fairmantle Capital, who are an investment and acquisition company, and that's what they deal in. They deal in what we've been talking about in the last 2 weeks, driving value into the business. What's even nicer is the week after that we have Neil Carberry, the head of the REC, on. So that'll be a very enlightening conversation with Neil about what's going on in the marketplace, how he's influencing the marketplace and people around the marketplace. So that's another one not to be missed from there. So as always, if you've liked what we've done, please like it, put a share on LinkedIn, broadcast it anywhere. We believe this is all about what is good for the recruitment marketplace. So if you know other recruitment agencies that you think could benefit from this, please introduce us to them. That'd be much appreciated. And all that leaves me to say is have a brilliant week. And remember, every day we're one step closer to coming out of lockdown. So let's stand tall, let's stand proud, and let's get ready for that recovery, because it's coming and it's going to come quickly. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much. Have a good week, and we'll see you all next week.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Cheers, guys. Thank you.